So, what about these two theories that we began this series of films with? The biological theory that sex and gender are basically synonymous, and then the cultural theory, which says that gender is socially constructed. And perhaps it's tempting to side with the latter of those two theories. And I think that some people have made the claim that whereas the cisgender tendency is to sides with the biological position, the trans and the genderqueer position sides more with the constructivist cultural position. But if gender is a social construction, if gender identity is dependent on social and not biological factors, why would we all, whether we're cis, trans, genderqueer, why would we all spend so much time arguing about it? Or trying, often through great pain and great stigma, to find our own place within gender? And I think the innovation of psychoanalysis, and specifically Lacanian psychoanalysis, is to choose neither of these theories, or rather to choose both the biological theory and the social constructivist theory. And the Lacanian position is essentially this. Firstly, anything which is socially constructed is constructed through language. Anything gets its sense and its meaning through language. But there are limits to what language can do. There are limits to signification, limits to meaning making. And we find sex on the other side of that limit. Which means that sex and sexual difference are what cannot be symbolised, cannot be signified. There is, Lacan says, no signifier in the unconscious for sexual difference, which means that the unconscious just doesn't recognise sexual difference. It's, in a way, it's inherently bisexual or bi-gendered, in the sense that neither male nor female nor masculine nor feminine, none of these terms or concepts are enough to contain our sexual identity and our sexual relationships. And the sexual position or the sexual identity that we take, whatever it might be, is in a way is doomed to failure. And I think the arrogance of the cisgender position is to sometimes assume that one of these positions, i.e. the binary, heterosexual, kind of in line with biology position, is any less of a failure than any other. Or ignoring the fact that just because all positions with respect to gender and sexuality are doomed to some extent, that taking on an alternative position, so for example, identifying with the opposite sex to the one you were born with, might actually be less of a failure. It might be more of a success, more sexually and more generally personally fulfilling. And obviously this points to a fatal problem with the designation cis, in that it sets up cis kind of sets up camp in opposition to a whole load of other positions relating to gender and sexuality. Positions which really have little or nothing in common with each other, except that they are not cis. And it suggests also that the cis position has this kind of unproblematic, unantagonistic relationship to the other, to difference and to castration. And I think it was towards the end of last year, Slavoj Žižek argued that the trans position is a kind of doomed attempt to escape the problems of castration, as if being straight and cis lets you off the hook more easily. And that view, unfortunately, comes from the most famous Lacanian in the world. But it seems to me a fairly hopelessly straitjacketed account of gender, and an account which does Lacan little justice. So I'm going to finish these videos by quoting from a guy, I don't know what gender position this person takes, to be honest, but their name is Sam Warren Miel, and they write a blog called Different Coloured Hats, which I'll link to below and you can have a look at. But in discussing these ideas with Zizek, he says two things, and this is how I'm going to end this series of videos. Firstly, he says, if psychoanalysis cannot account for the existence of trans people without reducing them to a pathological version of the already pathological cisgender human subject, it risks becoming the obsolete science that its opponents already claim that it is. And Sam also says, if we are, as speaking subjects, inescapably doomed to failures of communication, failures of sexuality, failures of identity, if we are in the final analysis subjected to such a fate, well, I am in no hurry to deconstruct someone's desire to use a certain toilet.